Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Harding from the fiction faculty at Stony Brook's creative writing program. Welcome to the latest episode of our Writers Speak Wednesdays series. So tonight we have an in conversation format. After I introduce him, our sublime man of the hour, Roger Rosenblatt, will read an excerpt from his latest book. Then he and I will talk together for a bit, presumably about that book. Once we've had a chance to talk a bit, we'll start to take some questions from the chat feed. So you can type your questions in at any time. Don't worry about interrupting us. We found that conversations can develop among the audience while the readings are going on. So feel free to comment on what you're hearing. Then after we've all feasted on truth and beauty, Roger will conclude our evening together by reading another brief passage from the book. Roger Rosenblatt is the author of 5 New York Times notable books of the year, 4 national bestsellers, and 7 off-Broadway plays. His essays for Time magazine and the PBS NewsHour have won 2 George Polk Awards, the Peabody, and the Emmy, among others. In 2015, he won the Kenyon Review Award for Lifetime Literary Achievement. He held the Briggs Copeland appointment in the teaching of writing at Harvard. He is also our own beloved teacher, mentor, colleague, dear friend, and distinguished professor of English and writing here at the Stony Brook program in creative writing and literature, and film and television writing and children's literature and podcasting and food writing. Roger is with us tonight to talk about his remarkable new book, Cold Moon, published by the always wonderful Turtle Point Press. I will sing the book and Roger's praises throughout our discussion. So now please just join me in welcoming Roger Rosenblatt.
Thank you, Paul. It's such a joy to be with you always, on camera or off. I should tell you, or people who are watching, that I'm sitting at a piano so that you don't think I'm playing a table later when I have an occasion to play just one song. I promise, just one. And before I begin, I just wanted to indicate how Cold Moon came to be. It was a sense of surprise to me. There were 3 inspirations, 3 sources of inspiration. One was the moon itself, the cold moon, about which I just learned and then elaborated on. The cold moon is the last full moon of any year, and it augurs the winter solstice. And since I'm in the winter solstice of my life, it seemed to be a fit. And then the other inspiration was the ocean. And I got a chance to spend some days at the Jersey Shore and look at the ocean there and the moon on the ocean, and they had their influence. And the third inspiration was Laurie Jones, who was a graduate student in our department and a wonderful writer herself, with whom I had conversations about this book. And those conversations helped the shape of the book enormously, and they helped something much more subtle, and I'm not even sure how it happened, but my writing changed as a result of that to a clarity within the lyricism. I used to write, or generally wrote, lyrical prose and characterized by ellipses, but it wasn't always as clear as it ought to be. It started to get clearer as a result of these conversations with Laurie, so I thank her very much indeed. I owe her a great debt, which of course will not be paid in royalties. So let me read you a little from Cold Moon, how it begins, and you might get a sense of the feeling of the book. Wipe the tears from your face and see the boulevard of light the moon has cast on the black water. See the boulevard as a staircase laid flat for a moment before it takes shape and rises. Like the one in the movie Stairway to Heaven, a sort of celestial escalator made of white marble steps moving forever skyward. The story is about a courtroom trial in heaven, a battle for a man's soul, whether he should die young as he was scheduled to do or be allowed to remain on earth and live out a long life. A woman's love for him wins the case. Love wins the case. Wipe the tears from your face. See the moonlight and rise. No need for a stairway. Hold on to your soul. One shot of courage, and we're climbing. Sitting on a beach with my 10-year-old grandson, Sam, I watched his brother, 6-year-old James, balance himself while standing barefoot on the top rail of a high, white wooden fence. James does things like that. Climbs something and finds a perch, disregarding any possible danger. Now, dressed in red shorts and a Washington Nationals blue t-shirt, he is gazing out to the sea, his little body angled away from Sam and from me. It's a wonder how James goes off on his own and takes in whatever he can, I remarked to Sam. Without turning to me, looking admiringly at his brother, Sam says matter-of-factly, he loves life. Midnight on December 20th, 2019, nearing the advent of the year of flawless hindsight. A bloodshot orange presents itself without notice on the northern horizon, just above the dark beach and the dark sea. This is the cold moon, also identified as the long night's moon, the last before the winter solstice. My weathered mind flicks to my own winter solstice, the coming of my winter time of life. Through a 3-windowed wall, I watch and brood. The sea rolls out like an old dog into its own black coat. The cold moon, now saffron white, sketches a sporadically spotlit path, recalling the jungle runways I saw in Africa when I was a journalist, writing about wars. Dim lights like phosphorescent animals murmur at the far end of the beach itself, a bench of robed jurists versed in maritime law. A solitary tern hangs in the air on the word wait. An unseen magistrate asks, who is responsible for this wreck? How still is night, and with every passing year, a hardening of the arteries, the bones fray, the skin puckers, the skills ebb. At this age, comrade, at this stage, what is to be done? Should we toss in the towel or gallop across the Anchikov Bridge together in the opposite direction whence we came, and like the czars make a palace of winter? I am a book in your lap. Better to know where to go than how to get there. I wander from thought to thought, having learned but 3 things from my long night's moon. I believe in life. I believe in love. I believe we are responsible for each other. Blood roses, life. A golden bubble of the sun, a rhetoric of shadows, a redeeming snow, life. The click of the lock, the crackpot, the camo kayak, the littered dock and mottled face of the kiosk where is the drowned girl, life. The annals of your eyes, blood on a boxing glove, blood on a tunic. Well, did you ever, what a swell party this is, life. If you're ever in a jam, here I am. If you're ever in a jelly, rub my belly. Coffee grounds on Stephen's Sunday morning. They've clogged the drain, evidence of rain. Ravens explode upward in a black parachute, life. A flattery of moonlight, redeeming moonlight, and the cold moon acknowledges the glitter of the sea as a day moth folds its wings and sings, good night, ladies. It swings. Moth dreams, rub your angry skin till it's raw, blood on your knuckles, blood on your thighs. Cast your aspersions to the wind, your icons, bygones, frantic, pedantic, antic, Atlantic. Life, life, life. One afternoon, I heard a thud from the kitchen. When I went to look, a dead bird lay on the deck outside the sliding glass door. The glass door had brought about the death of the bird, which must have mistaken it for open air in the blinding sunlight. The bird's body had left an imprint on the glass, vague and lacy, like a smoke ring from a cigarette. The imprint was a complete circle, except for a small smudge at the top where the bird's head must have hit. The little guy lay on its back on the deck, still as any sun worshiper. I did not recognize the markings, green, orange, and brown like a mallard, but smaller. When I picked it up to put it in a Ziploc bag, the bird felt heavier than I had anticipated. The body had heft and substance. Only when I had tossed it in the trash and returned it to the house did I notice the imprint on the glass door. It was there that day and remained through the following morning and a few days after. I would wipe the glass door clean eventually, but not that day. The smoke ring was all that was left of the bird. What would you leave behind? This book and that. What would you leave behind? This gesture, that smile. What would you leave behind? A faint imprint, a feather. What will you leave behind? Would you please repeat the question? What will you leave behind? I don't know. Love? That's more like it.
Thank you, Roger. That's beautiful and beautifully representative of the book as a whole. One of the things that I just want to ask you about a little bit more of, just even about the kind of the idiom and the structure of the way the book is put together, because as people could hear from that, I kept thinking, even for, the quality of the writing and even the way that Turtle Point put the book together, it feels like you're holding a prayer book almost, or a psalter. The pieces have a way of riffing off one another, and it's like reading psalms or listening to hymns. And one thing you've mentioned, the book talks about it at length, and you've mentioned in an interview about this appreciation of life, the embrace of human love, and the exercise of responsibility toward one another constitute the essential trinity of our existence. And you talk about that a little bit in the book, where with reference to, I'll just read from the book, jazzmen like Bill Evans and Miles Davis, who are masters of the ostinato, the repeated phrase or theme. So practiced are they in this art that 5 levels of ostinatos can be reached and detected at once. The effect is a mystery. You remember hearing something that you hear for the first time. One may try for that effect in writing. 2, life, love, and responsibility. In the ostinatos of these fragments, can you make out a tune? And that's the way the book seems to work, is that you keep it's like theme and variation, and you keep having this kind of infinite, inexhaustible kind of kaleidoscopic permutations and rearrangements of what become very familiar and deeply sort of themes that are sort of taken to heart. And so I was just wondering if you'd talk about that, just the composition of that, and how that came about.
Well, I'm not Christian, so I don't know everything I should know about the Trinity. But one impression I always took was that the idea of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit were not pillars that were stolid in the earth, but had a fluidity of moving among one another, and therefore moving among the people for whom they would do some good. And so I think of life, love, and responsibility in the same way as a Trinity that is fluid, that it moves from thing to thing. Responsibility itself, the idea of how we feed upon one another, how we need one another, even in nature. It shows in nature. I talk about it in one part you may remember, about a mimosa tree in Texas, where the beetles go to lay their eggs in deep fissures in the branch, and once they lay those eggs, they die, and the eggs then are alive, and the eggs become more beetles. But what happens is that the branch of the tree falls off and the tree dies. And from that death, then life comes to another mimosa tree. And so these beetles and the mimosa trees live in this symbiotic relationship where one absolutely needs the other for survival and perpetual survival. And there's this incredible microchimerism that goes on in the placenta of a mother when the cells of the mother are passed to the child aborting. It happens just at conception. It takes your breath away. And from that time on, all 9 months and then afterwards, the cells remain in the child, in the mother. And the cells in the child become part of the heart and the lungs and all the organs of the child in this transaction, this chat that goes on across the placenta right at the beginning. And what happens after that is that the mother then is strengthened to give further birth, so that the child not only is responsible for the mother's strength and the mother's for the child, but there are children to come afterwards who are fed by the same incredible procedure. And so it goes. So nature has all these processes that we look for. And then, as you know, as one of the great observers of fiction writing ever, as you know, so much depends on how much you can see. Just look very hard at life and see all there is to see, at the wonder of it. And then it's very hard to think at that wonder how one would not then embrace life.
Yeah, and there's that. I think we're familiar with it from literature, but that idea, and again, it's almost sacred, which I want to talk about a little bit too. The idea of the sacred, but that idea that it's very this idea of you call it appreciative seeing, and that it's almost a kind of imperative. Look, listen, ponder, and the idea that that this life is participatory, very transcendentalist, long tradition of that kind of thinking, but that sense too that this is an imperative, this sort of moral dimension or component to it. The idea that we're almost, I think of it. My favorite Swiss theologian, Karl Barth, he says somewhere that we're ordained to fellowship. And so that kind of symbiosis, that responsibility that you treat as an imperative, I think seems to be of the essence. That very, very experiential.
The idea of being ordained is such a wonderful idea, as if there were a biological imperative at work. And I was always interested in Darwin's third edition of Origin of Species, not the first two in which he didn't mention God at all or any creator. And the third one he did, and some people think that he was doing that under political pressure because everybody was so sore at him for not mentioning God. I don't think so at all. I think it was an evolution of his own thought. And he thought somebody had to plan this, or something had to plan this, or some force had to be behind all this. And so he gave credit to it, which is the idea of being ordained, or of the ordainer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I was, I was thinking about. That part of so much of the book does feel, again, like prayer or petition, or a kind of hymns, singing sort of praises of this existence and this, this given humanity. As I was thinking that it's sort of one of the things the book does is it sort of sacralizes the sacred or the secular in a way, as it were. And it just got me thinking about, people tend to be very self-conscious about religion these days, and religious people won't talk about it in public, or this, whatever. We have our problems with the dialogue about religion, and one of the things that got me thinking about is just that in some ways we've lost, or we're in danger of losing, the sort of the idiom or the repertoire, the lexicon, the verbiage of just how to talk about what's sacred to us without being self-conscious or thinking about, it automatically has to be religion.
I think so too. I'm watching, as you are, and undoubtedly watching Judge Barrett's time before the Senate and the questions that she's answering. And I'm hardly a Republican, and I'm sorry that her candidacy has come up at a time that is bad for Democrats, bad for my side. At the same time, I do think she has all the right in the world to hold on to her religious beliefs, and that she has every imperative to keep them private. The whole idea of religion is a kind of sacred privacy. She says, and one has to believe her, that that her religious beliefs won't enter into the decisions, and one hopes that is so. But I see no point in, and I think it's wrong to pry into someone's the sacred places of the body, the sacred places of the soul, and say, show me everything about you. One of the great things about religion is that we don't show everything about us. We keep it husbanded, and we keep it quiet. You were talking about prayer before, and sometimes I believe in God and sometimes I don't. It depends on the day. But the idea of prayer I do believe in as a form of longing. And in the book, I think you hear the sound of longing, of trying to understand things that are confused or contradictory.
Yeah. I think of myself as going back and forth between being a terrible Protestant or a terrible atheist. I'm no good at either, So, but I take what you say to heart. The idea too that that you would have this deepest inner life, and that you shouldn't be asked to necessarily bear it in public. But the idea too that I think sometimes there's the assumption these days that there is no deeper place where you hold these, secret or sacred personal experiences of your own humanity. It's almost like people just think they don't exist, or that they atrophy or something like that. I think
talk about conscience a lot of the time, and those things. That business really is between you and you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes me think of just the way that say William James wrote about religion, and just that idea. And again, we're in a feedback loop here because I think that this is what your book is constantly discussing, but also embodying. Which is just this. Singing the song of myself. It's that idea of you're observing closely, you're bearing witness, and in that you actually sort of get to that in a kind of almost ironic way, or kind of mystical, beautiful way, back to that old idea of the I and thou. That you're articulating your own experience and modeling your own poetry and your own attentiveness to your own humanity and to other people's humanity. And I think that one of the things that art does when it's working is it encourages like behavior,
And it encourages confusion too. I mean, art is not supposed to answer questions. It's supposed to just put a very nice shape on confusion.
Right. Well, maybe that's so one of the things that, because along the lines of when I read this book, I keep thinking of my teacher Marilyn Robinson always used to say, well, you should get your books to good books embody their own meaning. And but just the idea that the work of art is always being an instance of its own sort of declared values and its own declared subjects and themes, meanings, and all of that. And there's a real beautiful openness to this book, where it's and when I talk about it with students and other writers, I often think about the writing here is much more improvisational, which starts to bring some music into the conversation, maybe. But it's interrogative too. You're using language in an interrogative way. It's almost incantational, and you're invoking meaning and language onto the page. And so it's interrogative kind of rather than declarative. And it seems like that's a quality that is a deeper kind of solicitude for the reader. You're not over determining things. It's not a deterministic universe that you're creating, and in between the covers here. And so that idea that it's not coercing the reader. It's not trying to strong arm the reader into. So what I wanted to do with that actually is just a very sort of paraphrastic way of asking you if you would read a little bit from page 54. One thing you can say about the sea is this resolution, because resolution is something I think would be kind of neat to talk about.
Will do. One thing you can say about the sea, it resists resolution. In turmoil, in a murmur, under a typhoon, in the doldrums, it moves constantly without any indication that it seeks a single shape, goal, or purpose. It does not wish to take a position. To the contrary, it clearly, actively wishes to take no position, or to take every position at once, which makes the sea like poetry, like art in general. Art gives shape to irresolution, everything resolved by nothing resolved. Something implied in this, I think, the act of resisting resolution, suggests limits to knowing. The motion of the waves, the motion of the mind, keep life at sea. No answers here, no answers in a poem by, say, Wallace Stevens. There is this possibility, there is that, Both coexist in a comfortable discomfort. What do I mean when I speak of the world? What size object do I have in mind? Something so huge one cannot wrap one's arms around it, or wrap a thought around it. Something so small one can hold it in the palm of one's hand, like a single tear. That's what happened in Stairway to Heaven. A man's soul was rescued from death by a handheld tear. I am a little world made cunningly, said John Donne. All in one, I am limited without limits. How strangely calming it is to watch the sea, creating, unquesting, content in its cresting, unquesting, content in its eternally restless self, to seek without any ambition to find. Love is a bit like that. We live in one another's shadow.
Man, that's just beautiful. It's just so, again, it's just so evocative. That just feels like, just that you could just keep opening that passages like that up. And they are solicitous of the reader because they just invite the reader down those wonderful kind of, some people would say meandering, I would say generously capacious and open-ended, paths of imagination and thought. Then that last line, just for some reason, to seek without any ambition to find, love is a bit like that. It reminds me of the line in one of Auden's poems where he says something like, the truth, I might get it not quite right, but the truth, like love and sleep, resists direct approach.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so that's just, just that when you say art gives shape to irresolution, and that's not like lacking in resolution to, I resolved to fight for social justice. It's that kind of more, you don't want to overdetermine things. You don't want to cut off. You don't want to put up dead ends or cul-de-sacs for people, particularly as an artist, as working aesthetically. It's the idea of the openness. And I think about the way that I was interested in the ostinatos and this sort of thing, because you take finite elements and you can infinitely make different permutations of them and just keep a work of art open that way. This is what I teach Shakespeare, so this is what I have that on my brain. But you just watch him in those plays, he just takes finite ideas and themes and just keeps permutating them, and you can never get to the bottom of them because you're not supposed to. They're mysteries for us to ponder and never solve, as it were, But really what I'm trying to get is, I want to ask you, because you're a musician and because you and I talk a lot about improvisation and the imagination, and you improvise on a piano keyboard almost in the way that you write interrogatively the prose, right? Comes over the wire and you translate it. So this idea of irresolution got me thinking about suspended chords and how those work in music. And I was wondering if you
suspended chords. All of jazz, suspended chords. If you listen to Monk, I don't know if he plays a pure chord ever. But a pure chord would be this. That's a perfect C chord. C, E, and G. And the suspended chord adds one note and makes a new note out of it. I'm adding A to the G. And it changes things. Some songs actually begin on and play with suspended chords throughout. Embrace me, my sweet embraceable you. Embrace me, my dear, irreplaceable you. Just one look at you, my heart goes gypsy in me. You and you alone bring out the gypsy in me. Something on. I what's your papa do? Suspended chord, my sweet embraceable. You end on a suspended chord. Suspended chord is what in writing? It's ambiguity. It's tension. It's the thing you do not expect because it's a combination that you haven't heard before. The interesting thing about the suspension in music and in writing too is that when we see something suspended, we suspect that eventually it's going to land, and it does. It does land. Sometimes it lands on a pure chord, sometimes it lands on another suspended chord. But eventually it comes to earth. And that's what in Paul was talking about living in ambiguity, which is what artists do. But there is underneath that a kind of terra firma of belief. So this book has both, I guess. I tried to be ambiguous or to indicate that I hardly know all the answers. I hardly know all the questions. But in the end, I believe in life. I believe in love. I believe we are responsible toward one another. And those are firm beliefs that become the true chord, not necessarily the suspended chord.
Opine upon. There you are. You were suspended for a minute there.
Well, that's as close as I can to explain what I mean by writing suspended. And I do improvise all the time. One reason I improvise is I'm so bad that I will make so many mistakes that the idea is to make something right of a mistake. And that's what Miles said. You remember that? Miles said, there are no mistakes in life, just opportunities to improvise.
Yeah. And that's something we discuss with students all the time, which is I often say to my students that if there's no such thing as digression, because if you try to keep to the straight and narrow, you may miss the turnoff to your real work too. And a lot of times, something that may show up as a mistake or a liability in the first draft is actually the location of it. So much of it has to do with like taking what are liabilities in first or early drafts and turning them into the greatest virtues of the story you're working on.
Have you ever, as a novelist, pursued a digression and discovered that the digression was really the story?
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually, the novel that the novel that I'm working on now, I actually, it started off as one thing and I kept writing pages after pages after pages after pages. And one day I noticed who's that guy out in the meadow with the easel painting the haystacks? And the whole novel just slowly turned into being about him and then his family. And it just, this whole other... But that idea, again, also that early drafting is like improvisation. You're sort of trying to, you're trying to invoke the thing, and I'm always thinking about, I'm trying to write my way to the threshold of the real story, as it were.
And by the way, I hope you won't mind my saying so. I've had the joy and privilege of reading that second novel, and a lot of people think, well, he did Tinkers. You're not going to do any better than Tinkers. This is as good as Tinkers. And it just is shockingly different, so brilliant. I cannot wait for people other than myself to read it. It's a masterwork. You're an astonishing writer. The whole idea of improvisation interests me because sometimes I think I improvise my life. That you go in one direction and then suddenly something swings you in another direction, and you find out that direction may be for you, at least for a while, and. The same thing is true in music. Surely you start to follow where the chords go and where the notes go, and they go into very strange places. But they do wind up in a place that makes you feel like yourself, and then you're home.
Yeah, I think that there is that sense that you're sort of, in the larger sense, we're all doing it on the fly. Most of us are doing the best we can on the fly in good faith, And I think, again, it's like a feedback loop that loops right back into this idea of close, careful observation, close inspection, and appreciation. That's one of those. This is one of the things that we always, when I teach the Old Testament, people are continually saying, God, give me a sign, and God says, look around. It's nothing but signs. What more do you want? Oh, that's very.
No, I was waiting for you.
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's, again, just also that idea too, that it works with music, but it works with, as a writer, it's a very, very practical bit of advice too, as sort of metaphysically, it works metaphysically, but also works in a very literal as well as figurative way, which is just one thing I'm always telling my students, I'm sure you're telling the same thing, is that when you go down into a scene, your job is to cultivate almost like a muscle, like the actual technical chops, to be able to not only pay the closest possible attention, but to sustain it.
Yes. And to sustain it, that means you got to go deeper than you ever think it is. You are there and you think, oh, I've just gone as far as I can go. I've just got, as the song goes, I've gone as far as I can go, and you haven't. And sometimes you are shocked. Your head will snap back, and you say to yourself, "Did I write that?" And you have no idea where it came from, but as Alice followed the rabbit.
Yeah, that's one thing that that I'm always more and more obsessed with, which is just the far, actually, apparently, infinitude or limitlessness of description. And just the world will reward as close attention as you can pay to it. It will always yield something more.
It's astonishing to me how the limitlessness of metaphor and the where these things come from, so that you find yourself not making sort of one-to-one comparisons as one does in similes and metaphors, but reaching to a point in history or something strange. The part that I read to you at the beginning, I have no idea why suddenly the beach looked to me like robed jurists versed in maritime law. Maritime law made a little sense because they were by the sea. I have no idea why I was seeing judges in that setup, or who is responsible for this wreck. I mean, I can bring it around so that it sounds like I meant it. I didn't mean it. I don't know where it came from. Sometimes I think to myself, I didn't mean that, but I think I should have meant it, or maybe I meant it, and maybe I'll bring it back to where it makes a little sense. That's what I was saying before, that I was so grateful for a change of writing that occurred, where I started to get clearer within the ellipses. I could do ellipses before, but I started to think sometimes they were too unclear. Now I feel a kind of clarity in the ellipses, which is a nice stage of writing. It's nice to hit this at an older age. It's nice to hit it at all.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is I think that, that sustaining that close attention, it rewards you in a way that it's like revelation, these minor revelations that sort of sustains you and keeps you going. But I take your point about you get to these moments, if you're lucky, you feel just like that kind of gratitude, where you get to those mysterious points, and and people say, people will ask you subsequently, what does that mean? And you say, it means itself. It just stands for itself. It means itself. I have no idea. All I know is that it was one thing, is you, as a writer, and this too, is you do have to spend, kind of like agonizing, making sure that the vision that comes up that you don't understand is true, though. There's that weird, and that's why it's art and not, carpentry, cabinet making. But that idea is like, I don't know what that is, but it's something. It's something just happened, something true.
Then you find that you owe it something, that it suddenly has appeared, and it's kind of a gift. And then your gift in return is to make it as good as possible, to make it as polished and pretty as possible. So you spend some time on it to make sure that everybody can enjoy it as much as you're enjoying it, and that you feel like almost an aesthetic obligation to words, to make the words shine, to make the words sing. You feel that in piano playing too. The idea that you have in your hands the opportunity to make something beautiful. So why don't you?
Yeah, and there's that. I think there's that sense too. Then you again, it's just the deeper you go, the more humbled you are by, again, what this close observation, what's the looking more closely, listening more closely, and the world will always just give you more to hear and more to see. And that sense of obligation to be, then you suddenly become the steward or the caretaker of something, that you find, more precious than anything you could have actually just deliberately, intellectually thought up for yourself.
Absolutely. I wrote a memoir a few years ago called The Boy Detective, and in the middle of The Boy Detective, I start to talk about the reservoir in New York City where Edgar Allan Poe used to walk around. It's where the New York Public Library is now, but in the middle of the city, there was this reservoir. Then suddenly, for no reason at all, I start to go into the voice of Edgar Allan Poe, and I write a few pages from as if Poe is speaking, and he's actually apologizing for a murder that he committed. I haven't the slightest idea whether this was true or not, and I obviously didn't care about it, didn't care whether it was true. It certainly seemed like exciting enough to write about. And then I get off of Poe and I go somewhere else. The thrill of being able to to be open to those moments of language or moments of thought. That book gave me a great deal of pleasure, Paul. And you'll appreciate this too, because the late Pete Hamill, I'm so sorry, he was such a good guy. He died this year. Pete Hamill wrote in his review that I write like somebody plays jazz, and that I seek only to surprise myself. I swear to God, I never had thought of it that way, but once he said it, boy, did I glom onto it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I need no other compliment.
That's another one of then you have these private moments of revelation when it's just you and the language, and then you send it out into the world and people see things that you couldn't see, and then you're astonished to have that connection made. But you find that there are these things that are true that the moment they're pointed out to you, you recognize them as just having been true, and you just hadn't noticed them. Anecdotally, I had some interesting experience of when Tinkers came out, and the review of it came out in the Irish Times, and the reviewer devoted a couple of paragraphs to how much Tinkers was an homage to Beckett's novel, is it Malone Dies, right? Which I had never read. I hadn't even read the book. And then I read the book. It turns out Tinkers was quite an homage to Beckett's book. It's just so bizarre. It's just like beautiful. That's the art. That's the true mystery without being mystifying about it or whatever. It's very profound.
It's wonderful. What an experience.
These deeper resonances that art can sort of set reverberating, in the imagination, but then also in other people's, hearts and souls.
Well, that's one of the great gifts of being an artist generally, and being a writer. And you and I know that, and our students know it. Our wonderful students know it too, and they're knowing it in an early time in their lives. So they got a whole life ahead of them of knowing it and re-knowing. The thrill of being part of people's lives whom you never see. You are writing for audiences you never see. You know nothing about them. You only make yourself known to them through your writing. They only know you through your writing. And then they take your writing and they translate it into their own lives, the privacy of their own lives. And you are reaching people that you never would be in touch with at all. They will never be in touch with you, but you're reaching out quietly through words to something that they will make an attachment to, and perhaps be improved by or moved by, or something will change them. And you've done something that's worth a life.
And there's an instance of that exercise of responsibility toward one another that you're talking about. You know,
Yeah.
the idea that one of the things I say to my students, another thing I say to my students all the time is, you should be thinking about your own work in the way that, you know, someday your book will be as meaningful and as an indelible part of other people's lives as the books that have meant the most to you are in your life.
Wonderful thing,
you know,
Tom.
and
It's great.
Yeah,
And,
that's that profound.
Just hope it's true.
Yeah.
One of the things that we tell our students, and which, I mean, it emanates from this: trust the reader. You don't have to write everything in a paragraph, in a sentence. Trust the reader to fill in some of the blanks. The reader wants to do that. The reader wants to be with you, take the ride with you. So give him a little space, give her a little space to ride in your story or in your poem, and you'll see your language will improve because of its restraint.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's another version of the ellipses. You know,
Yes,
the reader will, if your writing is doing the job, the reader will be providing connective tissue, you know, in a way that completes, you know, that's almost a collaborative sort of thing. It completes the meaning that the work is implying and has a certain kind of momentum towards, you know.
Sorry.
I was just going to say I could just keep talking all night, but I see by the clock on the digital readout, maybe it's about 7:48. So maybe, did you have a last little bit that you wanted to read for us?
I will, yeah. Just the last two sections. The whole book is in short sections or movements. All my books are this way now. It's kind of a simulation, or I try to make it a simulation of music. Come do it while you can. Come help them. They do not call you, they do not know you, but come anyway. In a shiver of wildflowers, in the seepage of the December ocean, as a cortege of blackbirds passes by, do it. No need to be territorial. Extend the borders of your authority to the ferrymen, the nervous Nellies, the tailors, the traders, the birders, the hoi polloi. In a snit, in a rage, in a snowstorm, the sea white as a sheet of paper. Make a mad dash for them before the gate slams shut. You still have time. He who hesitates is toast. Those tanks, the machine guns mounted on the tripods, they can't hit the side of a barn. Under the boardwalk, fish slap themselves to death. Pack up your commas and your consonants. Unfortunately, the brass band is on holiday at the Ritz, so you'll have to come unheralded. Don't worry, nothing to it. No preparation necessary. You look fine. Oh, this old thing. And lose the fruit basket. Come as you are. First light. I drift among the flotsam like bait, circling the traps. I paddle on my back, playing otter, cracking clamshells with my paws. In a passing gondola, a radio plays on the nodes of the blues. 10,000-year-old bones of a murdered tribe rise up in Kenya and reassemble themselves. We are all repeat offenders. One day I'll go out and douse the flamethrowers, sink the armadas, and play 7-string guitar for school children. One day I'll comb the beach for bottles containing notes from the past. One day I'll die, but not today. Today I play September Song on the piano. Today the wind ruffles the fretted terrain of Mars. The mimosa grows in Brooklyn. The stairway climbs to heaven where love is. The cell keys sleep, the eggs hatch, the cells chat. We are life, we are love, and we are responsible for each other. I troll my paw in the water and feel candles. And these few precious days I'll spend with you. These precious days I'll spend with you.
Absolutely brilliant. I don't think there's anything more we need to say other than, on behalf of myself and our audience and your students and all of your readers everywhere, thank you so much, Roger, for just putting so much truth and beauty into all of our lives.
Thank you, Paul. It's a lovely thing to say.
Okay. So, and good night, everybody, and thank you.